Well, if you're new to Church of the Crossroads, let me just kind of share with you real quickly who we are. We're still kind of, as a church, I equate it to dating. Like, we are just, 7-8 weeks old, and we're still getting to know each other. And what we are, who we are really, is just kind of a mess of a group of people. Like, we're not people who have it all together. Like, we are broken, and broken in a lot of ways, and we've messed up big time in a lot of ways. And some of us have been in church for a long time. Some of us are just coming back to church. We're still trying to figure all this out. So that's kind of who we are. There are people here who are overcoming pain, loneliness, brokenness, addiction, and shame. But all of us, here's what we have in common, are pursuing Jesus. Have turned ourselves over to Jesus because we believe He offers hope for everyone and healing for everyone. And so He is who we're all about. So if this is your first time here, we're glad you took the risk. You're not alone in investigating this church. For us, we are still investigating one another in some ways. And I'm terrible about this. Actually, I'm good. I've always been pretty good at remembering names in ministry or in churches I've been in. And I'm usually good at recalling, putting a name to a face, but I've been horrible the last 8 weeks. Like, there are so many new people in my life now. I can't keep it all together. It's just not packaging in my mind where I can put the right name with the right face, and I embarrass myself every week going, now, sorry, tell me your name again. And I've met him 4 or 5 times. I'm struggling with that. So it's kind of like dating, where we've only known each other for 7 weeks, and it's been fun, but it's still kind of awkward, and we don't know everyone, and we're always asking, what's your name? And that's kind of where the dating analogy, that's where that doesn't work there. Like, if you're going on a date, now what's your name again? I've known you for 7 weeks and I just can't name with the face. Yeah, that's how awkward this whole thing is for me. Like, trying to get to know you. I love you. You are. Anyway, I'm still trying to keep myself from making you wear name badges like my name is. My name, though, so you know, is John Parkey. And all my friends call me Park. I respond to that best, so feel free not to call me Pastor John or Brother John. I appreciate, I'm pretty laid back like that. Like, I'm not a suit and tie guy. Matter of fact, if I'm wearing a suit and tie, I'm either marrying you or burying you. Those are like the only 2 times I put on a suit. And so that's me. I'm laid back like that. All my friends call me Park. Feel free to call me that. I respond to that better. I appreciate the respect of Pastor John or Brother John, but honestly, the title, the truth is, I'm just one of you. And I'm just trying to figure out how to follow Jesus better myself and let Jesus have me more and more every day. And so I'm in this with you. I want you to know that. And so I've talked a lot the last few weeks about Jesus and Church of the Crossroads and helping people get to know what this is all about and who we are all about. But one of the things maybe I failed at is letting you get to know me. And so I thought maybe this morning, not the whole time, but I want to share with you a little bit about who Park is, who John Parkey is. And I grew up a preacher's kid. My dad still preaches every week, and I'm actually a 5th generation preacher. Like, my great-great-grandfather was what was called a circuit rider. He rode a horse and started churches in Appalachia, in eastern Kentucky. And so he'd preach on Sunday morning, he'd ride his horse to the next church and preach, and then he'd ride the next to preach on Wednesday somewhere else. And so that's kind of where I come from. This runs deep in my family. But have you ever heard, or do you know that people say preachers' kids are the worst? Anybody? How many of you knew a preacher's kid growing up? And that was true of them. Hold it high. Like, they were the worst. Yeah. You know why preachers' kids are the worst? Yeah, here's why. Because I fought, that was true of me. I don't know about the worst, But I think because there are these expectations of the preacher's kid being all of that, raised in this like super Christian home, there are these expectations of who he or she should be, and even if you mess up a little bit, everybody's like, "Yeah, preacher's kids are the worst." Like he said a cuss word. But no, for me, here's where it came from. Preacher's kids have to smile and show up on Sunday morning and on Sunday night and on Wednesday night with the pressure to represent the preacher. So we had to be there every time the doors were open and with a smile on, dressed in our Sunday best. Anybody grew up in church, we had to put on your Sunday best? Yeah. I hate that, so I'm wearing a sweatshirt the rest of my ministry career. So all this pain is coming out today. Here's why I do what I do, because this is therapy for me, by the way. And we had to sing all the songs, and in Sunday school we had to be the smartest kid there. We had to know all the answers, and we couldn't. It was tough to be honest with who we were and what we were wrestling with. So like in the preacher's home, and my parents loved me. My parents were available. My parents were there. But there was just this unspoken, like, in your home, it wasn't safe to say, you know what? I'm not sure I believe this stuff. You know what? I'm hurting in this way. And so there's this pressure to have it all together or to be something that you're not. And I think every kid, if they've been raised in church, kind of goes through some of that. Like, is this a safe place to share this that I'm wrestling with? Is this a place to share this sin that I just committed? And a lot of times as kids, we don't feel like it's that way. In a preacher's home, that gets just escalated. And so what preacher's kids do, at least what I did, is this. We show up and smile on Sunday, but party hard on Friday and Saturday night, right? But we have to make sure that no adults find out and tell the preacher, because the preacher's your dad, right? So what happens is I got real sneaky, and I became a real good liar, So my story kind of plays out like this. I grew up, my dad preacher, in a small church, about 100, 150 people. Small enough that by the time I was in, like my dad was the only person on staff. And so in elementary school, we had like youth groups until I was in about 6th grade. It was all run by volunteers. I don't know if you know this about middle school students, but they are weird, right? And I'm saying that about myself when I was in middle school. So if you're in middle school, I'm not saying that about you, but you're weird. Middle school, it's awkward. Right? Middle school is just awkward. It's a tough time, right? Like you have to prove yourself. There's this whole thing, and so it takes a unique volunteer to lead middle school students and not be paid to do it, right? And so by the time I was in middle school, there were no volunteers, and so we didn't have youth groups. I didn't have any other adults besides my parents in my life pouring into me and teaching me and holding me accountable and that kind of stuff. And then by the time I was in high school, in this little bitty church, there was me and there was one other girl who were in high school at my church. And so I had no friends that attended church with me, and she and I weren't. I remember her name. That's all I remember about her. We were the only 2 high school students in our church. No youth group, nothing special for us, nobody pouring into us. We just showed up with the adults and listened to what the adults listened to and tried to understand it, or even tried to listen. You know, I was doodling on bulletins during the sermon. So what happened is, by the time I got in high school, I have nobody really pouring into me. Friends or even other adults who took me aside, were investing in me. So that's kind of the church setting. In my kind of outside of church, what happened in middle school is I started becoming pretty good at basketball. Like when I was in 5th grade, the 7th grade coach called my parents to see if I could play on the team, and I ended up being the starting point guard for our 7th grade team when I was in 5th grade. And so I continued to grow as a basketball player, and what that did for me is I started getting a lot of attention. for playing basketball. And what was really cool is it was a lot of us from girls. And for me, that was like, okay, there's something to this. I better get better at this, right? So I got a lot of attention from adults too, people who appreciated the game and appreciated my skill and started just, encouraging me in the game and the sport. And so attention from adults, attention from the ladies as a middle schooler. And so I poured all I had into basketball and started getting all of this attention. Now that did something, all that attention did something to me. It began to make me arrogant, and it began to be where I found my identity, find my friends, find value, right? Not just in the sport, but what the sport, playing the sport, offered me. And so by the time I was so there's this church setting where nobody's looking after me, nobody's pointing into me except my parents, and at that age your parents are dumb. Just being honest. And then I'm gaining whatever attention over here. And that made me proud, that made me arrogant, and it gave me a lot of opportunities to sin. And so by the time I'm in high school, like I go off of the rails spiritually. And I began to pursue sports, and sports offered me girls. And so I began to party. And I partied not because I liked the party, but because the girls were at the parties. And so by the time I finished high school, I was pursuing sex like crazy. And I was dabbling in alcohol and recreational drugs. And I was off the rails. But very sneaky and very quiet about it. Only my friends knew, no adults, none of my family. And so I was, at the same time, I knew what was right and what was wrong. So I was coming home feeling guilty and ashamed. Like this was fun. This was in the moment, this was awesome. But I would come home and just feel dirty and guilty and sorry, broken. And I didn't know what to do with that. And as a high school student, you don't know how to express yourself. You don't know who to express yourself to. And you don't tell your friends you're feeling this way because you're not cool if you do. And you don't have anybody to talk to over on this side. And so I just stuffed it all. And my heart just got hard. And I just kept going after these, sex and basketball and parties even harder and faster. And so that's high school. I go to my freshman year of college. I leave home and live on campus. That's never good when you're already heading down that route. You know what I mean? And so my freshman year, I had an opportunity to play basketball at that level. And I show up at college, I get around these guys, and the opportunities just went to a whole new level. The best way to put it is the opportunities to sin were easy and they were endless. And I was all in every week, not every weekend, like all week long, just looking for the next thing, the next fix, the next. And so by the end of my freshman year, I'm in this downward dark spiral. It's fun, I look happy, I'm having a good time, but at the same time, I'm in this kind of spiritual, emotional spiral. And by the time I get home for the first day of summer break, I'm kind of done. I had gotten injured and didn't get to play in any regular season games during the season. To cope with my injury, I kind of medicated with alcohol and other sins to escape. So I get home after my freshman year. I almost flunked out. That's how my grades were horrible. And so I show up at home on the first day of summer break, and I tell my dad. This is the first time I ever confessed to him, and this is about the surface level of confession I give him. I say, I can't go back. I'm done with that, and I want to play ball, but I cannot go back because I'm miserable, and I can't say no to those guys. And because I can't say no, I can't go back. That's about the level of confession I gave him. Something's not right. And so my dad played basketball in Bible college, right? He went to a school in Tennessee, and it's where guys go to train for ministry. And Here's the other thing that was happening in my heart. I didn't say this to him, but I thought this. I believe in Jesus, but to this point, all through high school and this first year of college, I've not met one person my age who loves Jesus. Not a single person. Now, I didn't really seek them out either. But the people that... I met a lot of people who said they believed in God and believed in Jesus. Like they believed in heaven, but they lived like hell the rest of the week. You know what I mean? And so I heard a lot of people say they love Jesus, but not live it out in their daily life. And so for me, I was kind of at a crossroads. This was a defining moment for me. I've got to meet somebody who's 19 or 20 years old who loves Jesus. I haven't met anybody yet who does, in the way that I read it in Scripture, in the way these people follow Jesus in the Bible. And I need to meet somebody who does, because if I can't find anybody in the next few months, I'm done with Jesus. I'm through with this whole thing. Why would I keep trying when it's not even real anyway? I haven't seen it lived out in a real way for somebody my age. And so my dad goes to this Bible college back in the, 60s, and I threw this out there to him. I said, "Hey, you went to Bible college. They train preachers there. I'm thinking about going there. I could play ball. Probably coming from where I've come from, it would be easy to make the team there, and it was real easy. It's just that level of ball, you know what I mean? But I had fun. I still got to play. But the point was, if there's somebody my age who loves Jesus, certainly they'll be at a college like that. You know what I mean? And so I applied. They accepted. I did not visit. I did not even know where it was. Like, we were driving to school, and I thought we were going to Nashville, and we ended up in Knoxville. That's where I was going to school. I didn't know what town I was going to school in. But I was determined to make some change, or find somebody who was different than me. And so I show up on campus the first day of registration. It was crazy now that I think back on it. And when I got there, like the very first week, I was like, okay, this place is different. These people are different than me. And I began to meet these men of God, 18, 19, 21, 22-year-olds who loved Jesus and really embraced me. And what I found out too is a lot of these students, these college students, grew up in churches where they had like youth ministers, you know what I mean? Like student ministers, other people in their lives who were looking out for them, who were coaching them through life, who were holding them accountable. Like in my town growing up, I thought I was sneaky, but I know there had to be people who knew what I was doing, you know? They had to have known what I was doing, and nobody said anything to me. Nobody challenged me. Nobody told my parents. Like, I was just doing whatever I wanted to do with nobody looking out for me. And these men and women at this Bible college had student ministers who were pouring into their lives and discipling them and helping them grow and helping them stay on track and showing them what it looks like, modeling for them what it looks like to love Jesus. And so I meet these students who are passionate and who are on fire for Jesus. And not all of them. There were a lot of people there like me who were running from something or running to something or trying to escape or trying to figure it all out. But there were students there who they love Jesus. And so I began to kind of soak that up. Now, I didn't get it all together immediately. Like even at Bible college, it still took me like 2 years to not go out sign out. Like, there were a lot of rules. Like, if you left campus on the weekend, you had to sign out. Like, it was that. It took a lot. I was signing out and not coming back till Sunday, but I wasn't going home, if you know what I mean. So it took me a couple years to kind of squash my old self. And probably halfway through the first semester, I met this guy named Mike. His name was Mike Luzatter, and Mike was he was a solid guy. He was a junior, lived on my floor, and you got to remember where I was coming from. I'm also sitting back and assessing everybody, and you're either cool or you're a nerd, right? And Mike was a nerd. Like, Mike was uncool, like as uncool as they come. But at the same time, something drew me to Mike. He was solid. He was pretty steady, you know, and he didn't talk a lot of religious jargon. He was just real relational. And Mike asked me one day if I would be interested in coming to a Bible study that met in his classroom. And my first thought was, well, that sounds cool. That's probably something I need. My second thought was, and that also sounds pretty boring. Like, just a bunch of nerds studying the Bible. Like, do I really want to be associated with that? I'm still wrestling with myself, this old self. And so I finally, after a few invitations, I showed up. And I'm glad I did. Because then there's 4 or 5 guys in there, and guys that I knew, and guys that I thought were like on fire, loved Jesus, had it all together. And for the first half of our time together, for the first 30 minutes, we would study the Bible. And then the second half of our time together, Mike would ask these like real personal, uncomfortable questions. Like questions like what are you afraid of? Clowns. I mean, no, dig a little deeper. Like what are you afraid of on a daily basis? You know what I mean? Like what fears do you carry with you through your life? Questions like, how have you hurt someone? Or how has somebody hurt you? Or how have you hurt yourself? And to myself, like he's asking questions like that, and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm not going to share this with you right now. But my greatest fear is you finding out just how junked up my life is. Like my fear is you finding out just how bad and nasty I really am, how terrible of a person I really am, and you not inviting me back, or you finding out and you hearing me tell my story and you judging me, or you kicking me out of your circle, or here's the greatest fear that I carry around in my life at that time is me telling you my story and then you going out and telling everybody else my junk, right? So I don't know if you're safe enough for me to tell you what's going on with me in the moment. That's my biggest fear, and what I was really kind of deeply wrestling with, but I didn't know it at the time. I look back and I see this now. My biggest fear was not being loved. That was my greatest fear. Love for me at the time was based on performance, was based on cool factor, was based on talent, was based on status. Like love for me was based on what do I bring to the table? Like what are my talents and gifts and skills that I bring to the table? And people love me because of how good I was at certain things, right? But as I listened to the other guys in that group, in that Bible study, answer those questions, these guys, I thought they had it all together. Well, they start sharing deeply and they start confessing. Like out of these guys that I thought had it all together comes confessions of brokenness and shame and pain. It's somewhat similar stories to mine. But also out of them, despite the brokenness, shame, and pain, out of them also I hear like forgiveness and healing and joy and peace. Like I hear them talk about that they've done these things, but they feel forgiven. Like, and so I'm like, why would they share this stuff? And I found out why they would share this stuff. The first one is they did feel forgiven. Like they didn't carry the weight of their secret sin or their shame or their pain with them. Like they had let it go. They weren't bound by those things. They didn't define, those things that they did in the past didn't define who they were today. And so they shared those things. They were brutally honest about themselves because they felt forgiven. The second reason they shared those things was this, and this is kind of what I want to get at. Mike when they would share their sins or their brokenness, their pain, whatever, Mike never flinched. Like Mike never said, "You did what?" Like he just listened, and he just loved anyway. And that was my first experience with genuine, loving mentorship, or the Bible calls it discipleship. Now, I was way too proud and too cool to tell Mike this at the time, but in my mind, Mike and that group, they became my spiritual leaders and my spiritual support group. And one of the things I learned through all of that is this: I don't just need church. And I don't just need a preacher in my life. I also need a close spiritual leader. Someone who knows me well. And someone that I know well and trust. Someone who will challenge me and encourage me and wants to help me grow. Someone who will call me out when I need to be called out. Someone who will encourage me when I need to be encouraged. Someone that I meet with often. Someone that I can call, and someone who will call me or text me. Like, I need that in my life. And in that story of me and that group, it took a month or so, but I finally remember I shared a big part of my story with that group of guys. Like, I finally got to a point where I trusted them. I realized they would still love me. They wouldn't take all my junk out there and tell everybody else and talk bad about me. So it was safe. And so I began to share. I let them in on my story, and I began to. So the first time I shared like 10 years of sin. Like, I confessed for like the whole hour. You know what I mean? Like, there was this and this and I remember even like feeling safe with them. And even kind of like feeling proud as I was confessing, like, oh, I'm going to make Mike go, whoa, like, I'm going to drop this big confession of this big sin, and they're just going to go, no way you did that. But they never did. Like, I would share these big sins, these things I was ashamed of, and I would share this just junk in my life and the ways that hurt myself and the ways that hurt others, and they would all just say things like, wow, that must have been a heavy burden to carry. Never telling anyone that. They would say things like, you know what, you can let that go. It's okay to let that go. God has forgiven you. It's okay for you to forgive yourself. It's okay. And then they would say things like this, you know what, you're still worth it. You are worth it. And you know what that did to me? And that changed me. And that just impacted me to the core of my soul. And it was in that group, with that committed group of devoted men devoted to Christ, committed to being honest, committed to being transparent, committed to meeting together weekly for our own spiritual growth. It was in that group that my life began to make a turn, began to change. I found what I was looking for, right? I found Jesus followers. And that experience changed my life. It redirected me forever. Now, it didn't fix me, and it didn't cure me. Only Jesus can do that. And sometimes Jesus, He doesn't take His time. But I think for us, we struggle to humble ourselves and give Him all of us so that He can fully change us. You know what I mean? And like for example, my past, the things I did in my past, it impacted my marriage. You know what I mean? I mean, the things I was doing when I was 16, 17, 18, 19 years old hurt my wife. And I didn't even know when I was doing those. And we had some things we had to overcome. But the marriage side of my life is for a whole other sermon, okay? And and my wife wants at least 10 minutes to share during that time, to share just how messed up I really am, right? We're good, and I love her. But we've had to work. We've had a lot to overcome together, and partly because of our past. But so anyway, so my 4 years there, and Jesus getting a hold of me. It took me a while to get to this point, but there came a point in time where, like my senior year, because of what I experienced at college and with these group of guys, I made a commitment. I made this commitment. I will do everything I can to help those who want to be helped so that they won't have to suffer and walk through life alone. Like I want to be a part of God's process in someone's life as they overcome, as they find freedom, as they find peace and joy and growth and change. Like I want to offer to others what Mike offered to me. Like I want to be a spiritual leader, and I want to be a part of changing lives. I don't change lives, God changes lives, but I want to be a part of the process. And in those times when there are too many people for me to do that, I want to train up other leaders who will offer, and we can expand our ministry in that way. Like I want to train spiritual leaders. I want to recreate as often as I can that experience in that group for others. And that's the way we see Jesus doing this ministry. That's the way we see Jesus doing it. I want you to look at Matthew 4:19. It'll be on the screen. It says this. Jesus said, "Come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." I will help you fish for men. What Mike did for me and those few other guys in that room, he was modeling exactly the way Jesus did ministry, the way Jesus worked. Like Jesus, if you know the story of Jesus, Jesus invited 12 guys. The Bible calls them his disciples. He invited 12 guys to follow him. Like Jesus says, "Come follow me," and when you do, what I want you to do is I'm going to teach you, not just through words. I want you to just watch what I do. Watch how I interact with people. Watch how I perform miracles. Watch how I love people. Watch how I love even people who are enemies. Watch how I live. And so they did. Like Jesus said, if you want to put it in a redneck interpretation, he says, "Watch this." Just, hey, watch this. And so they do. For 3 years, they follow Jesus and they watch what he does, and he teaches them. And at some point in time, Jesus, as they are following him and watching what he does, he begins to change them. Like something stirs in them and something in them begins to change. And that's kind of the second part of this. Jesus says, "Come follow me and I will make you." Like that's Jesus saying, I will do the shaping, I will do the changing, I will do the transforming. I will make you into something. Like I like to say it like this. When you choose to follow Jesus, what he does in you is he squashes that old self and he brings out in you the best part of you. That's kind of what Jesus does. It's kind of that simple. And so these guys drop everything, they follow Jesus, and they begin to experience like this change, this being shaped. And you need to understand this. You and I can't change on our own. Like, at least very well. Like you may have tried to change some things about yourself. You may have had some success in an area or two for a little bit, but in the end, it's God. Like it's through Jesus Christ that you are fully changed. He's the only one who has the power to do that. Like he's the only one who has the power to bring out fully the best in you, if you will follow him. Ezekiel 36:26, God says this to his people. He says, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." Like Jesus, like God here is saying, if you will let me have you, this is the best way to put it, I will soften your heart. Like I will make you something and someone new. I will change you. Jesus says, "Come follow me and I will make you, I will shape you, I will change you." But he says, for what purpose? Like, come follow me and I will make you what? Fishers of men. Like when we study, follow, and live like Jesus, he changes our passions and our desires. He changes what we pursue and what we're about. And ultimately, he changes us into the kind of people who go after other people. Like ultimately, he changes what we pursue and what we are about. He changes us into people like into people like Mike. Like someone who wants other people to know and experience and grow in Jesus Christ. Someone who goes after people with the good news and the love of Jesus. That's ultimately what Jesus wants to shape you for and shape you into. Now think about this. Jesus had 12 guys, right? He had these 12 guys for 3 years. Now what you need to know about these guys is they are ordinary. There is nothing spectacular or cool about these 12 guys. Like, they're just ordinary guys. 2 of them even have mommy issues. Like James and John, their mom comes to Jesus and says, "Hey, my boys would like to sit on your right and your left when you become the king of this world. When you take the throne, James and John, they just really want to sit." Like, their mom, these adult men, their mom comes up and asks Jesus, could they sit by you? And then there's this other guy named Peter, who is passionate and fiery, and he has good intentions, but he just can't say the right thing. Like, he just keeps saying the right thing. He just keeps saying the wrong thing, and Jesus has to constantly rebuke him. Like if you read it like this, Jesus is constantly going, "Now Peter." Like he's just constantly trying to redirect him because he just can't. So these are ordinary guys with ordinary problems. Like, there is nothing about them that is extraordinary in any way. And Jesus takes them, he invites them to follow him. And then what happens after that 3 years is Jesus gets crucified, he gets buried, he resurrects. They see Jesus dead, then they meet him alive, and he ascends into heaven. And before he does, he says, something cool is going to happen. Like, you're going to carry out my ministry. And then this happens. Acts chapter 2, verse 14. These ordinary guys with mommy issues begin to preach. Acts 2:14 says, Peter stands up with the 11, raised his voice, and he addresses, so there's this big, like thousands of people are gathered. And he begins to preach. He says, "Fellow Jews, all of you who live in Jerusalem, let me explain this to you. Listen carefully to what I have to say." And so for the next few verses, he just tells people about Jesus. He just tells them Jesus died for your sins so that you might be forgiven and made right with God. But dead, he's put in a tomb. Fully dead, completely dead. He resurrects himself. Like, he defeats death. He preaches this. And then in Acts 2:41, here's what happens when these ordinary guys preach, but with the power of the Holy Spirit and Jesus leading them. It says, those who were there, those who accepted Peter's message were baptized. Now listen to this. And about 3,000 were added to their number that day. 3,000. This is not addition. Like, this is multiplication. One Jesus takes 12 guys. 12 guys are shaped, made into fishers of men. They begin to preach. One forms 12. 12 impact 3,000. We've been talking about our values as a church, and here are their first 3 values. We have 4, but our values are how we do ministry. They are what are important to us. They're kind of what we want to be known for. And our first value is this: we believe there's hope for everyone. And I preached on that for the last 6 weeks or so, come out of the gate talking about that. We as a church believe there's hope. No one is too far away from God. Our second value is this: we contribute more than we consume. We talked about that last week. When Jesus gets a hold of you, you become generous. You start giving stuff away that at one time was really valuable to you, and you're like, nope, they need it more than me. I want to make a difference. I want to see other lives change. I want to invest in the kingdom work here. But our third value is this: we multiply our efforts often. because because Jesus invested in those 12 and those 12 and those 3,000, you and I are beneficiaries of that movement. Mike, because he understood how Jesus did ministry, I was a beneficiary of Mike's understanding of that. As a church, we want to be a part of this movement, this great movement that started 2,000 years ago. And so we will multiply our efforts often. Not just for the sake of multiplying, but for the sake of lives being saved. So that those who are lonely do not have to walk through this life lonely. So those who are broken do not have to suffer in their brokenness alone. Like, we will multiply our efforts so that others can find joy, freedom, and peace in Jesus. It's our desire to see people set free through Jesus Christ. And we want to make as big an impact in Mount Washington as possible. And so as a church, we will do this in 3 very specific ways. The first one is this. Right now, we are training up small group leaders. These are guys that we meet every week in somebody's home, and we're getting them ready for January. And in January, these 7 guys will open up their homes, and we will invite you to be a part of small groups that meet in homes. Groups that will look and sound a lot like the one I was in when I was in college with Mike. They're for your benefit and for your growth. So we will multiply in that way. We'll also multiply in ministry. Like, we've got, I don't know, 12, 15 ministries going on around here, and they all have a leader, but they need help. And so we want to expand our ministries and expand our teams so that nobody has to work 100% of the time. And some of them who are back in children's area can come in here from time to time or a little more often. We want to expand that and even raise up other leaders to help the leaders that are back there. We will always be thinking multiply. How can we recruit, train a new leader in those areas? And so, and the third way we want to multiply often is this. We are, as a church, a benefit of, our beneficiaries of Journey Christian Church down the road in Shepherdsville. In some ways, this was their idea. Jeremy called me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about planting a church?" And I was like, "Sounds pretty cool. Let's give it a shot, you know." And he saw the need, made the phone call. We want to turn around and do this again at some point in time. And so we will, in the next, Jeremy and I already talk about this all the time, but we will, Journey and Church of the Crossroads, get together and figure out how to plant a 3rd church somewhere in the region. Because we want to, not for the sake of just saying we did it, but because people need Jesus. And not everybody's going to feel comfortable walking into Church of the Crossroads. This isn't for everybody. But we want to create environments where people do feel comfortable in their neighborhood, in their area, in their city. So we will do this again at some point in time and encourage you to, in some way, to be a part of it, contribute to it, whatever. We will always multiply, not for the sake of multiplying and patting ourselves on the back, but for the sake of saving others from a fiery hell, and that being their end. That's what we're all about. We will multiply often. This morning, so take all that in. I just dumped a lot about myself on you, but here's why. The things that I experienced, being alone and broken, proud and arrogant, which is just another way of saying alone and broken, trying to prove myself, right? All of that shaped me into who I am today. In that most desolate loneliness, meeting Mike and that group of guys, man, that brought me to Jesus quickly. In some ways, I could say that environment saved my life. And we want to be about saving other people's lives. And so this morning, if you're here and you're part of the Church of the Crossroads and you're a follower of Christ, be praying about that. Be praying about multiplying. Be praying about how you can get more involved in Church of the Crossroads. Or if you're here for the first time, or if you're here and you're investigating Jesus, I just want you to know this morning. We are a broken mess of people. If you are hurting and broken, lonely, whatever it is, you are not alone. The difference is we're just pursuing Jesus, and we want to invite you to pursue Jesus with us because we believe He is our hope, our only hope. He's set us free. He's fixed us in some ways. He's healing us in other ways. He's changing us for the better. He's squashing that old self. He's bringing the best out of us, we hope. And if you want hope for a better tomorrow, hope of a better eternity, we invite you to come to Jesus. So while we